We're here with Ron Dermer. He's the Israeli Minister of Strategic Affairs, a very close confidant of Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. And I must confess, one of my best friends, to be perfectly honest with you. This family, our family, very, very tight. And Ron Dermer, I didn't know that the elected Israeli government, the democracy in Israel, was full of all these criminals, where the arrest warrants are issued by this radical, left-wing, anti-Jewish European concoction that was created after World War II in part to protect the Jews. Can you tell us what's going on here, sir?
Yeah, but tell me how you feel about it, Mark.
Exactly.
Frankly, you're right. You got a rogue prosecutor there, and you might have a kangaroo court on your hands, and it's really shameful. I would say that the decision yesterday to try to issue arrest warrants against, and judges will have to confirm that, against the Israeli Prime Minister and the Israeli Defense Minister was both outrageous and dangerous. It's outrageous, obviously, because of the false equivalence. You bring charges against Hamas, a genocidal terror organization, and its leaders, and charges against the leaders of the Democratic State of Israel. So you're bringing charges against those who perpetrated the most savage attack on Jews since the Holocaust, murdering 1,200 people, taking 250 people hostage, raping women, burning babies, the worst crimes that you can possibly think about, and then go to Gaza and embed themselves in the civilian population in mosques and schools and hospitals. And on the one hand, you're putting them in the dock, and then you take Israel, the leaders of Israel, which is a stand-in for the people of Israel and the army of Israel, who is going and fighting this terror organization in ways that no other army in the history of the world, and certainly the history of urban warfare, has ever done to get civilians out of harm's way. And you're putting them on the same moral plane. It's like having the Nuremberg trials and getting, the Nazi criminals there. And, yeah, we're going to have also Churchill and FDR in the dock. This is absolutely absurd. But beyond that, it's the false charges. It's not just the false equivalence between Hamas and Israel. It's the charges itself. It's utter libel. The main charge that the ICC prosecutor has brought forward, and you know something about prosecution, is that Israel is willfully starving, has a policy of trying to starve the population in Gaza. This is absurd. I'm a member of the War Cabinet. From the beginning of the war, we have had a policy of enabling humanitarian assistance to go into Gaza. There have been over 20,000 trucks of food, around 30,000 trucks overall, something like 500,000 tons of humanitarian assistance, including 400,000 tons of food. The IDF has been paving roads to get these trucks to come in. We've been opening passages as Hamas is firing on those passages and stealing the humanitarian assistance. And we're the ones that are being accused of war crimes, and they're also accusing us of deliberately targeting civilians, which is outrageous. As I said, we're taking action no other military has ever taken. That's just not what we say. That's what John Spencer at the Urban Warfare Institute at West Point says. That's what General David Petraeus says. Nobody has ever taken this action. We're dealing with this subterranean terror tunnel network with a terror organization that beds themselves in these civilian areas, and yet we're doing everything to get the civilians out of harm's way, dropping leaflets, making phone calls, millions and millions. We've just, as we're speaking right now, around 950,000 people have been evacuated from Rafah as we go to finish off Hamas there. So it's not just a false equivalence between Israel and Hamas. It's that the whole charge, the whole rap sheet is utterly false. But beyond being outrageous, it is dangerous. And it's dangerous for two reasons. The first reason, it is a threat to democracies everywhere. It's not just about Israel. It's any democracy that's fighting terrorists. Now the terrorists are going to think we've achieved a great victory because you know what? You can embed yourself in civilian areas, use your population as human shields, and the ICC will be on your side. So this will start with Israel, but it will not end with Israel. Remember, they were trying to bring up your soldiers for war crimes charges and actions in Afghanistan, your brave men and women of the United States military. They're going to come back and they're going to try to issue arrest warrants against American soldiers and American leaders. I guarantee you that's going to happen. It's Israel first, and America's going to be next. The second reason why it's dangerous is because it's going to fuel anti-Semitism around the world. You've seen this explosion of anti-Semitic hate against Jews. You have it on the American college campuses. This guy, this prosecutor, this rogue prosecutor, is now pouring fuel on this fire, and it is very, very dangerous because people think, ICC, it's a legitimate institution, right? It's an international criminal court. There must be some basis to this. Well, he just brands Israeli leaders and really the country of Israel with a scarlet letter, WC war criminal, and puts that on our breasts. And what do you think is going to happen now on these campuses? All of these people who hate Israel, hate America, hate Jews are going to feel they got wind in their sails to continue what they're doing. I think it is incredibly dangerous, and I'm very glad that a lot of members of the Senate and members of the House, and if the president said it was outrageous, I hope there will be a bipartisan bill that will slap sanctions on these people. The Trump, as you recall, an executive order for sanctions against the ICC when it was your soldiers in the dock. Hopefully they will turn that executive order in some kind of legislation. It will get bipartisan support and send a very strong message to the ICC.
Now, Ron Dermer, Israeli Minister of Strategic Affairs, part of the War Cabinet in Israel. I'm just curious, did the prosecutor's office gather any information that perhaps Israel may have been able to provide? I mean, did he take a visit to Gaza? Did he take a visit to the Nova Festival area? Did he gather facts on the ground?
He actually came here 3 or 4 months ago, was invited by some of the hostage families and looked at certain things that happened on our side of the border. He was supposed to come to Israel in a week from now. And we said, look, we're prepared to do an engagement with you. Frankly, they have no jurisdiction over the state of Israel. We are not signatories of the court. Neither is the United States. Now, a lot of people are talking about Palestinian state. Yes, no. Should he have it? Should he not have it? Is this the right time? Well, guess what? The ICC basically has determined that the Palestinians are a state. That's what they think gives them the jurisdiction to deal with some of these crimes. So they have no jurisdiction over this issue. But even though they have no jurisdiction, we said, listen, if you want to come and you want to look at Israel's legal system, its court system, one of the most independent, if not the most independent in the world, you want to look at how we prosecute different allegations, by all means. And he was supposed to come next week. He committed to American senators, to the White House, to the State Department. He said, listen, I'm not rushing to judgment here. I'm going to have a process of engagement with Israel. It could be weeks, maybe even months before we would make any decision. He hoodwinked everybody. He didn't come to Israel. He just decided, I'm going to have a press conference now. I'm going to defame Israel. It is based on total false allegations of willful starvation and targeting innocents. And he's basically bought into a lot of the baseless allegations and lies against Israel, and it's a modern-day blood libel. That's why the Prime Minister of Israel, Netanyahu, was right, that he's going to take his place alongside these great modern anti-Semites, those infamous judges of Germany that sat there and donned their fancy robes and enabled all the rights to be taken from the Jews as they were on their way to the death camps. This is what this person is doing. He is trying to shackle Israel, to deny us our ability to defend ourselves. It's very nice, everyone says Israel has the right to defend it, but when we exercise that right, now Israel's moral army, the people of Israel who are fighting this just war with just means, now we're going to be hauled in the dock. They're denying us the basic right of self-defense. One thing I can assure you, and I can assure all your listeners who I know are huge supporters of Israel, this will fail. We will prosecute this war until the war is won.
Isn't the truth, Ron Dermer, that if Israel didn't care about civilian casualties, this war could have been ended in a matter of months, but in fact, debates go on in your cabinet, debates go on in your society, debates go on among allies and so forth on how to conduct this, how to make sure you as few citizens as possible are harmed and so forth and so on. It's not a matter of the capacity of Israel to blow this town or that town off the face of the earth. Israel's debating most of the time on how to protect the civilians while it's trying to protect its own civilians.
That's correct, and we always uphold the laws of war, humanitarian laws as well. And we have, from the beginning of this war, we have a system like you have your JAGs, and we have legal people in all of our IDF processes. When you have targets, you have to have distinction and separate the civilians, the combatants from the non-combatants. You have to have proportionality. You have to have precautions. That's why John Spencer, guy from West Point who teaches urban warfare, says, I've never seen anything like this. I've never seen a country go to such great lengths to get the civilians out of harm's way. And we also put all this humanitarian assistance in from the beginning of the war. Now, this has not been without controversy in Israel. A lot of people in Israel says, why are we doing this? These people are holding our hostages. They're in the dungeons of Gaza, deep underground, holding women and children and completely innocent people. And after they savagely murdered Israelis on October 7th, why are we abiding by these laws of war? Because that's what we do in Israel. And it's been, I wouldn't say it's a very popular position, but the Minister committed from the beginning of this war to enable humanitarian assistance to reach those people in need in Gaza and to fight the way we always fight, which is to get the civilians out of harm's way. And instead of actually giving a prize to the IDF for the way we fight our wars, instead of commending Israel for the way it fights a war, now Israel is being condemned and is being put in the dock. I mean, it is a complete moral aversion and a total travesty of justice. And I hope that any of your listeners, if there's members of Congress, members of the Senate who are thinking about what to do, I'm telling them and telling everybody, it's going to be Israel first and America next. And that's why there has to be a very strong stance against this. I hope it will be broadly bipartisan to push back against it, because it's going to be American troops that they're going to try to do this. You got these unelected judges on a court that has no jurisdiction in Israel. They're going to do the same thing to America. And I guarantee you that's going to happen. And I think what we need to do is show it can happen. The United States is going to take very forceful action. I think senators warned him before. I think Senator Cotton had actually put out a pretty strong statement yesterday and said, I look forward to him never setting foot, the prosecutor in the United States again, taking action against them. I think that's what's needed to do now, frankly. And I think what may happen from this is, if strong action is taken at the prosecutors against the prosecutor, if leading countries in the world had made statements against this, Britain, Germany, and others, then it won't be Israel that will be in the dock. It won't be Israel that will be turned into the pariah state like this, what the prosecutor wants to do. It'll be the prosecutor himself. And maybe these judges will stand for 10 minutes and actually protect the credibility of this court. Because if not, it's going to go right down the drain. This is what happened to the UN General Assembly in 1975. They passed this ridiculous resolution, Zionism is racism, and no one took them seriously again. It's what happened to the Human Rights Council that passes more bills against Israel than all the world countries, resolutions against Israel than all the world countries combined. They give a pass to the North Koreas and the Syrians and the Iranians and these gross human rights violations, and they just target Israel. Well, you know what it is when you target Israel, when you target the one and only Jewish state? You single it out and you treat it differently than any other nation in the world. There's a word for that, Mark. It's called anti-Semitism, and anti-Semitism is back, and this guy just poured fuel on the fires. And that's why it is such a travesty and so dangerous. And we appreciate the strong support we have, at least in the United States.
It's interesting, Ron Dermer, how they picked Israel out of all the countries to focus on here. Not Iran, not North Korea, not China, not Venezuela, not Cuba. Not a list of horribles where people are being slaughtered, where people are being rounded up, where people are never heard of again, where there is no civil rights, there's no concern about civilians. It's interesting that they pick Israel cherry pick it out of all these other countries. Doesn't that further underscore your point about they're really just Jew hating at this point?
Yeah, well, in this theater of the absurd, you mentioned Venezuela. This guy actually went to Venezuela. And he's now on a path of saying that Venezuela has this legal principle, which you know well, called complementarity, meaning this ICC is never supposed to deal with a case when a country's legal system is actually investigating crimes. It's supposed to only deal with cases where there's a breakdown of the country's legal system, which is obviously something we don't have in Israel. But he went to Venezuela, and he met with the head of Venezuela that, by the way, does starve his own people. And he says, well, you know what? We have a path towards complementarity with Venezuela, but you're going after Israel? And a lot of it is based on false reports. You know, I did another interview today, and somebody says, well, look, you know, Cindy McCain said there's full-blown famine in the north. And frankly, before this whole thing happened in the northern part of Gaza, before this happened, I didn't even respond to it. You know why? Because of Senator John McCain. Because I knew him. And I know this is his wife. She's getting totally wrong and false information. It is full-blown nonsense, what she said. There has not been famine. There is not famine. There is no Israeli policy of starvation. As I said, We're putting masses of humanitarian assistance in. Prices for goods are dropping all over Gaza by about 90% in the last 2 months because supply and demand forces work. You know, the markets don't lie. But they basically created this libel against Israel. People have bought into it. The organizations, the so-called human rights organizations that are working in Gaza are basically manned by Hamas. Just like UNRWA, they use the UN facilities. They actually ship out these lies. People file these reports. It is totally false. I don't know if you paid attention to it, but a couple of weeks ago, the UN said, you know those numbers we had of the casualties in Gaza was like 35,000? Well, 10,000 of them we can't identify. So everybody went out, including senators, and American senators, and they said, you know, there's 75% of the casualties are women and children in Gaza, and they put all these numbers, which come from the Hamas Ministry of Health. Now it turns out that the UN says, well, you know, 10,000 can't be identified. I mean, what is this? This is all a sham. Israel is fighting a genocidal terror organization, and our fight against that organization is your fight. These are people who celebrated 9/11. They will celebrate the destruction of America. And just like you have on those college campuses, all those people that are protesting Israel, you know, they don't have a kind word to say about the United States because they hate America and they hate Israel. It's the same thing that you have here. And I think it's very, very important for free countries, democracies, to stand with Israel in this moment and say, enough is enough. This is a line that you don't cross, and I hope we're going to see very strong action within Congress this week, and I hope the president will support it so that the United States will take a very strong stance on Israel's side against what is an outrage and, frankly, dangerous.
And we, as the American people on this, and we have an obligation to work on this too, and we will on this program as we do all the time. We understand the fate that if Israel doesn't succeed, what happens not just to Israel, but to the United States and the free world. And Ron Dermer, I want to thank you for your time. Please give our best to the Prime Minister and all the people over there who are fighting the good fight. Let me put it that way. God bless you, my friend.
Well, thank you. We know that our victory, which we're going to achieve, is America's victory. All the forces that hate you, hate us. We're going to defeat Hamas in Gaza, defeat the Iranian axis, and I think that's going to be good for peace and prosperity in this region in the future. But we have to finish this job, and we will not allow any international organization or any decision from the world to handcuff the state of Israel. 80 years ago, as the Prime Minister said on Holocaust Memorial Day, which was 2 or 3 weeks ago, he said we were totally alone. No one was there to help us. No matter what decision, no matter what pressure is going to be brought to bear, we're going to do whatever we have to do to protect our people. And the war that we are waging will be prosecuted until the war is won, for our sake, for your sake, and for civilization's sake.
And 80% of the American people, by the way, agree with that. God bless you, my friend.